Morning, church. Good morning to those of you who are joining us via live stream. We're glad that all of you are able to join us and worship together this morning. We finally are going to be able to go back out to Eddie Warrior and just done. It's been about 15 months since we've been able to go out, but we'll be going out this afternoon and conducting worship services both at Eddie Warrior and at Just Done. Please keep Henry and Cheryl in your prayers. They're going to dive right back into the deep end of the pool again as things really kick up and start moving along. I'm grateful for the doors that are open there, for the fact that we've had opportunity to touch hundreds and hundreds of lives, the gospel of Christ over the years, and we're grateful those doors are open again. We can begin to do that again. This morning I want to touch on the concept of going above and beyond. When they give medals out, sometimes they'll grant them with these words: for service that is above and beyond, we call it duty. Above and beyond is a wonderful concept. For one thing, it transforms got to into get to. And there's a world of difference between those two ideas. There are a lot of things that you've got to do. You probably don't enjoy those. But there are also things that you get to do. Those are the ones that you enjoy. Those are the ones you get involved in. And it's when we go above and beyond. I believe we get to move from got to get to. It provides a sense of freedom and a sense of accomplishment. I was told recently about a man who was a Navy SEAL. When he left the Navy, he decided he was going to go to college. And so he went to college, and every class he took notes, every class he studied just as hard as he could, every class he gave it his all. His goal, he said, in every class he took was to make an A, to be the best student in the class. He wanted to go above and beyond. When he graduated, he wanted to graduate with a 4.0 because he knew that would help open doors that he wanted open into the business world. He is now a very successful entrepreneur, involved in a number of different things. But his philosophy is constantly one of, I'm going to go above and beyond. And he says, that's where you find joy. That's where you find freedom. It's not in doing the time you're supposed to do. It's not in punching the clock at 8 and punching out at 4:30. It's when you go above and beyond that you find true joy and you find true fulfillment in his life. And that's the way he lives life. And I believe that's what we're called to do as well. The Bible teaches this principle in a number of examples. And I want us to look at a few of those examples this morning. The first one, drawn from the Old Testament, is the story of Rebekah. Remember, who is the wife of Isaac. In Genesis chapter 24, verses 10 through 27, we're told the story of how Rebekah is brought back to be the wife of Isaac, and it's fascinating, okay? Abraham has decided his son needs a wife. Now, again, this is the time of arranged marriages. You don't go out and choose your mate is chosen for you. Abraham calls in the trusted oldest servant that he's got, and he makes him swear a solemn oath that he is going to go find Isaac a wife from the territory that they used to live in, several hundred miles to the north. And so this old man sets out on that trek. He goes up there, and on the way he prays to God, and he says, God, please guide me to the right woman. And I'm going to kind of do a test. When I come up to a well, let there be a young lady there who will offer me a drink and will offer to water my camels. And if that happens, I'm going to know that this is the woman that you want to be the wife of Isaac. So he travels up there, and you got to understand back then, it's not like you can just turn the spigot on and get water, right? That it's a rare thing to have a well. He's hundreds of miles up north. He's among the people that he hasn't mixed with much at all. And he comes up to a well, and there's a beautiful young lady there. So he asks her, would you mind giving me a drink? And she says, absolutely. And she she gives him a drink. And then he asks her, would you mind watering my camels? Now, it's not a big deal here, folks. I mean, she's got to haul the water up out of the well. She's got to pour it out in the trough. She's got to provide enough water for camels who can drink a lot of water. You're not a camel. She does that, no problem. And then she will offer him, hey, why don't you come home with me and stay with my dad at my place, at our father's house. Okay? And he has found a wife for Isaac. What fascinates me is what he was looking for, folks. He was looking for someone who was unselfish. He was looking for someone who was considerate of others. He was looking for someone who would go without prompting, just because that's her nature, above and beyond. And that's exactly what Rebekah did. Rebekah went above and beyond. He was not looking for a wife for Isaac who's sitting in a tent, primping, and waiting for the servants to come in and bring her breakfast. That's not who he's looking for. That's not the kind of wife in that day and age that a man needed if he was going to get through this life. And so he finds Rebekah. But what characterizes her, what he's looking for, again, is someone who is going to go above and beyond what would be expected. Are you impressed when someone goes above and beyond in serving you? I am. I think we all are, aren't we? Recently, Eric was sitting at a stoplight, and a young lady didn't stop and ran into the back of him, and they had some body work done on his car. I took him to pick up his car after it had been repaired at a body shop in Muskogee, and Eric said, Dad, they not only repaired the car, and it looked perfect. I mean, they'd done a great job. He said, they detailed my car. And they had. They had detailed that car inside and out. Made it look like brand new. Now, that was above and beyond. You know, a good detail can cost you $100. They detailed that car inside and out. If, God forbid, he has somebody crush another bumper, guess where he's going to take that car? He's going to take it to a place who doesn't just do the job, they go above and beyond in doing that job. The peace offering in the Old Testament, to me, serves as an example of going above and beyond. The regulations for the peace offering are found in Leviticus 7, verses 11 through 21. Depending on the translation and the context, this is going to be called an expression of thankfulness, a fellowship offering, of thanksgiving, a free will offering. The bottom line is that in the first 7 chapters of Leviticus, what you find are a series of offerings that are outlined for Israel. And they all have to do with when you mess up, when you sin, when you fail, here's what you need to bring and here's what you need to offer. Then God says, oh, by the way, if you're just grateful, it's been a good year, and you want to give me something above and beyond what's required, here's what I would like you to give me. And you find the regulations then for what is called the peace offering or the thank offering. It was an opportunity to go above and beyond the regular sacrifice, to just express thanks for God's goodness. When I was working at Sunset, there was a lady who came to me one day, great Christian lady, super lady. And man, she was excited. She said, Dan, look at this. And she had a stamp. Okay. I'm not a stamp person. Anyway, she said, my husband has been looking for this stamp for years. And I decided that if I could find this stamp and buy it for him, I wanted to find it and buy it for him. And she had looked and searched online and checked here and checked there. And she had found this particular stamp. And she had saved her money and saved her money and saved her money because it was not an inexpensive stamp. And bought it so that she could give it to him. And what was really cool was, this wasn't, oh, honey, here's your anniversary gift. Oh, honey, here's your birthday gift. This wasn't a Christmas gift. This was just, I love you, and I know you want this stamp, and I found it, and I bought it. Here, sweetheart, here's the stamp. Man, that's what I call above and beyond love. And I've never forgotten that, because she was so excited to be able to give that to him and share that with him as an expression of her love. You know, I think about times here when brothers have come to me, sisters have come to me, and they've gotten a promotion or they've gotten a bonus, and they say, hey, God's really blessed me. I want to give part of this to him. What would be a good thing to give to? What would be a good cause to go above and beyond with? Because this is above and beyond what they usually give. What a neat attitude. And now, see, you're moving into get to, man, not got to. You're moving into a beautiful, special place, a very freeing place. And that brings me then to the concept that we find as Jesus teaches in the Sermon on the Mount of the second mile. Matthew 5, verse 41. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go 2. Now, this reference to the Romans' power to coerce had to be a bitter pill to swallow for the Jews. An example of this found in the book of Mark, chapter 15, verse 21, where when Jesus can't carry his cross, what do the Romans do? They shoulder tap, don't they, Simon of Cyrene? And they tell him, you're going to carry the cross. That's what we're talking about. Here's the thing. The first mile, I mean, imagine if we were living in a country now occupied, let's say for some reason the Red Chinese have taken over. And the Red Chinese now dominate in this country, and we serve them. And one of the things they can do is, if you're walking down the road, they can pull up beside you and stop you, and they can tell you, I got a backpack here, you got to carry the backpack the next mile. I'm not going to do it. You got to do it. Now that's the kind of thing the Jews are dealing with. And they deeply resent being treated, disrespected in a very real sense like that. What Jesus says is, you got to go the first mile. You don't have to go the second mile. The second mile, all of a sudden, that's the free one. Now you're going above and beyond. Now you've turned the tables, folks. You see, this soldier's got to hold this power over you, man. He's got to order you to go the first mile. Imagine how you defang him when you go, I'll just go ahead and carry it to the top of the hill over there with you. Isn't that where you're going? Well, I'm not telling you have to do that. No, I know. I want to do that. My choice. You see, now the roles have been reversed, haven't they? Now you're not being forced to do something. You're choosing to do it. You've really turned the tables there. You've freed yourself. Jesus says, be willing to go that second mile. When I was about 12, I went out to Ulysses, Kansas, where my cousin lived, and spent a couple of weeks with him. And he had a lady down the street, and he mowed her lawn. And he said, you want to help me mow the lawn? I'll pay you half. I said, sure. He said, but I want to warn you. You can't please her. She's going to come out, and I guarantee you, she's going to gripe, she's going to complain, things aren't going to be done right. I said, well, that's okay. We went down there, and we put our heads together. And so we mowed her lawn, but then we weeded her flower bed, which she wasn't paying us to do. And we did a couple other things there in the yard that she hadn't required. And we went up and knocked on her door. And she came out. And I would love to say, she went, oh my, you weeded my flowers. And you trimmed the area there around the porch. Well, how come you cut it that short over there? And that doesn't look quite right over there. But we could tell, this was cool, we could tell that she noticed what we had done, and it really made her uncomfortable. She didn't know how to respond to it. Now, I'd like to say it changed her attitude. I couldn't see it changed her attitude. but it changed ours. Because we had gone above and beyond. And she knew it. By the way, she didn't pay us anymore either. But we had gone above and beyond what was asked of us. You see, what Jesus is sharing here and talking about the second mile, brethren, is not a burden. Man, what he's talking about is a blessing, an opportunity to make a difference. And then there's the Macedonians' gift. The churches at Philippi and Thessalonica, remember, they've been planted in the midst of severe persecution. If you go back and read in Acts 16, man, that's where Paul and Silas get thrown in prison, placed in stocks. In Acts 17, boy, it's a tough situation in Thessalonica and that whole area. The churches knew tremendous pressure, okay? But the Christians in these churches had also experienced, as Paul says, severe trial, and not just that, but extreme poverty. That's how he describes it in 2 Corinthians 8 and verse 2. These people aren't just poor, okay? These are the people that are tokos. These are people that are dirt poor, okay? They don't have anything. But when they hear about a contribution to help needy saints in Jerusalem, what happens? They see the opportunity to go above and beyond. And so listen to how Paul describes them in 2 Corinthians 8, 3 through 5. For I testify that they gave us as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. Listen to him. Entirely on their own. They urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the saints. They did not do as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord and then to us, in keeping with God's will. Do you hear Paul? He wasn't going to ask them, brothers and sisters. He knew they didn't have anything. They heard about the need. They came to him. They offered to give, blew him away. They were going above and beyond. In the midst of not having anything, they were looking for the opportunity to share almost from what they didn't have with those who also didn't have. That is above and beyond. And it's a place of privilege. And it's a place of blessing. In the Great Flood of 2019, Butto it was, who told me about a couple who lost their house in that flood. Devastated. Didn't have a lot of money. What are we going to do? A little church up north came down, assessed the situation, talked to this couple, and said they had, I don't remember the exact amount, but it was tens of thousands of dollars in the bank. And they said, we're not using it. You need it here. And absolutely transformed their lives. Enabled them to rebuild. You talk about going above and beyond. Man, that's going above and beyond. Periodically, through the years, situations have been brought before your attention, and people again and again, they'll go to Glenn or they'll come to, and they'll say, hey, we want to help. We want to help. This isn't a part of the regular contribution. This is a part of the regular mission work. This is above and beyond, but we want to make a difference. And it's a special blessing. It's a chance to do something that you don't have to do. Okay, again, but that you get to do. What a special thing that is. Above and beyond. That's what sends a firefighter back into a burning house for another victim. He doesn't have to go in there. Nobody would criticize him if he didn't go, but he chooses to go. He goes above and beyond. That's what motivates a soldier to throw himself on a grenade to save the life of the soldiers about him. And that's when we start reading about in those medals that they have gone above and beyond what was required of them. This is what frees you academically or professionally or personally to transform your life. It's when you decide, no, I'm not just going to punch the clock. I'm not just going to do what's required of me. I'm going to do more. I'm going to go above and beyond. Above all, I believe this is what puts the zest and the fire in our service to God. It's when I'm doing something for Him that I know it goes above and beyond, is extra special. Make 2021 the year of above and beyond. Try going above and beyond in your marriage, in your school, in your job, in your service to others, in your giving to God. I guarantee you it'll make a world of difference in your life and in your attitude when you approach each day with this above and beyond attitude. And let me sum it all up with this picture right here. Brothers and sisters, there's above and beyond. That's God's love expressed for us on the cross. That's Jesus' love expressed for us on the cross. Never, ever in the history of mankind, and never again will there ever be an above and beyond gesture like that. Perfection, sinlessness, absolute 100% love, submitting to being beaten and tortured and demeaned and executed in a very, very painful way. He goes above and beyond. And that's what we have the opportunity to do, and our response to Him is to go above and beyond. This morning, if you're ready to respond to the above and beyond love of God, He's ready to receive you. If you're ready to confess your belief that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and put on your Lord in baptism, He is ready to take you into His arms and make you a part of His family. If we can help you in any way, won't you come while we stand and while we sing? It is time for us to begin class, and we appreciate all of you staying for our study together. We're going to be looking at the Book of Proverbs, and last week we began to introduce that book, and we looked at the fact that as Solomon writes the book, it fascinates me that the first 9 chapters are basically the introduction to the book. You really don't get into the proverbial section of the book until chapter 10. But in that introduction, he focuses on 2 things. There are 2 matters that he will stress again and again, and he'll toss a little bits of odd information in here and there and advice, but basically 2 themes. The first theme is wisdom, and the second theme is sexual purity. Now, last week we talked about his emphasis on wisdom and how important that is. And he stresses how you need to live your life in a wise way, that really you're better off to have wisdom than you are silver and gold. And I really do believe that's true. Ultimately, as far as quality of life goes, you're better off to have wisdom than you are silver and gold. He talks about the sources of wisdom, and we touched on those last week. He stresses the fact that basically you're going to find 3 sources of godly wisdom. Number 1 is God Himself and His Word, which is filled with wisdom. The second source of wisdom is going to be older folks. He will speak of himself as a father talking to his son, but it's going to be older folks who are going to give you advice and give you wisdom. And the third source is going to be the toughest, and that's life itself. As you learn from the hard knocks of life, because after all, one of the ways in which we define wisdom is as knowledge plus experience. And generally, a lot of times that experience is hard knocks. But from those hard knocks, we gain wisdom, don't we? The fact of the matter is, I really believe that there are no accidentally wise people. If you know someone who's wise, I really believe it's because they've dedicated themselves to living in a wise way and to gaining wisdom. There are a lot of people who have lived for a long time and they have never figured out how to live wisely. Their lives are a train wreck. We're called and given the opportunity to be wise people. But you have to make up your mind, okay, I want to be a wise person. What's it going to take to get there? And a part of that is going to be what we just talked about, leaning on sources of wisdom. The fact of the matter is you want to make your life a whole lot easier, and I've said this many, many times. Man, just live like a Christian, and you will make your life so much easier. You'll avoid so many problems, so much pain. You'll have so many positive things in your life that the world doesn't have. I guarantee you it will be that way. So many things that you'll never have to worry about if you live as a child of God. So many blessings that you'll be able to share with your family, with your spouse, with your friends, if you live as a child of God. Now, why does Solomon focus in this introduction so much on sexual purity? I chewed on that for days. Because, my immediate reaction would be, okay, if he's going to introduce this book by talking about wisdom, I see that, right? This is wisdom literature. Naturally, he's going to say, live in a wise way. Naturally, he's going to put a great emphasis on gaining wisdom and living wisely. But why then so much emphasis on sexual purity? And the more I thought about it, the more it made sense to me. Because the fact of the matter is that we are sexual beings. That one of the strongest drives God has given to us is the sexual drive. Very powerful, very, very powerful. So powerful, in fact, Sunday nights I'm going to be talking about the woke revolution that we're seeing in this country. And I really dug into this a lot. I really want you to understand what's going on because it's predictable and it's frightening. What's going on? It very much has to do with how thinking has changed in our culture over the last 100 years, particularly over the last 20 or 30 years, and it's radically changed. But one of the thinkers who is in a sense very much responsible for the mess that we see today culturally, particularly the confusion that exists when it comes to sexuality, is Sigmund Freud, the Viennese father of psychoanalysis. He was fixated on sexuality. He built his whole thought process around the fact that we are sexual beings driven by sexual desires. And while a lot of his theories and a lot of what he put forth has been shot down, his influence has not. And I believe that one of the reasons that we live, and I would describe our culture as a sexually obsessed culture, one of the reasons that we live in a sexually obsessed culture is because of the latent influence of thinkers like Freud. Now, there are others as well, and we'll talk about some of them. But they've had a huge influence on our culture and the way we approach sexuality and the way we think about sexuality today and the tremendous emphasis that there is on sexuality. When you think about it, why sex? Why not a whole section in the introduction on the need for honesty? Well, wouldn't that be apropos? But that's not what he emphasizes. What about the need for telling the truth? Again, tied into honesty and so on. I can think of multiple topics that Solomon could have chosen to address in this introduction and stress, and the one that he chooses is sexuality. When you think about it, Sexuality is very much tied to our relationships, for one thing, isn't it? I mean, God created male and female, didn't He? And He created male and female with sexual drives, and what did He tell the male and female in Genesis chapter 1? I want you to be fruitful and multiply, and what? I want you to replenish the earth. One of the primary reasons for marriage is procreation, isn't it? Procreation in a controlled, structured environment in which the children that are born to that relationship can grow up in a healthy, protected, safe, guiding, nurturing environment. That's His design. That's His plan. And so marriage itself is very much tied to our sexuality and sexual desire. But it's also tied to some other things. You know, what role does pride play in sexuality? Let me just think about it for a second. What role does pride play in sexuality? Why do young men and young women feel the need to undress in the summertime and flaunt their bodies? And they do. We'll see it. It's already happening, isn't it? Why? I'm proud of how I look. And I want you to look. Because I'm proud of how I look. It is all about pride. Don't kid yourself. Very much about pride. The Don Juans of this world. Very much about, yeah, I've slept with this many women. Look at me. Wilt Chamberlain, bragging about thousands of sexual conquest that he had, proud of the macho image that he projected, totally failing to recognize all the people he used in the process and all that. That was beside the point, because you see it was about him. But the sexuality was very much tied to his pride. Manipulation. The whole Me Too thing that's gone on now, and it's kind of died off a little bit, but remember how hot that was a few months ago. Sexual manipulation. I mean, so much going on, male and female manipulation. I'm going to maneuver you into being able to use you like I want to use you. Ugly, but tied to the power of sexual attraction and sexual relationships. Rooted right back to that. Lust. Just purity old L-U-S-T. Huge. Man, do you realize one of the most profitable industries on the face of the earth is pornography? That one of the most pervasive industries on the face of the earth is pornography? It is. Billions and billions and billions of dollars are spent every year on pornographic materials, pornographic videos, and so on. It's huge industry. And we're not even touching on the massage parlors and the gentlemen's clubs and all the other stuff that's out there that is strictly tied in very real sense to unbridled lust. That goes back to sexuality. What about objectivism? Sex objects. We speak of people, don't we, as sex objects. What's that mean? It means in lust, people take women, they take men, and they don't look at them as a man or a woman. They look at them as an object to be lusted after. What about deviancy in sexuality? And the incredible emphasis on deviancy that we see today, that's emphasized over and over and over again, and has become, and we're going to talk about this on Sunday nights, and has become so powerful that it's been politicized. And it has been. All of these things tie back to sexuality. Can you begin to see why Solomon is going to talk about sexuality? Because it has such a huge influence on who we are and how we approach life and how we treat other people and how we relate to other people. I mean, there are multiple ways in which sexuality can complicate life. How many individuals are out there deeply scarred because of sexual abuse? Man, we go out to the prisons. We go to Eddie Warrior. So many, the vast majority of those women who are out there have been sexually abused. And they're scarred by that. What about unplanned, unwanted pregnancies? The single mother crisis, it's a crisis. I mean, they don't want to talk about it, but it's a crisis that we face in this country. It is. It's an absolute crisis. And it's breaking us financially. We are spending trillions of dollars on programs that would not have to exist if people practiced sexuality inside of marriage. Like that. Trillions of dollars that we're spending would go away. Wouldn't be necessary anymore. And all the complications and implications that go with that. All the gangs that are out there. All the violence that fills our streets. All the other problems that we have that are very much associated with irresponsible sexuality expressed outside of marriage. And somebody has to clean up the mess. Somebody has to pick up the pieces. And this society can only do that for about so long, and then this society is not going to be able to do it anymore because we're not going to have the resources to do it. Think of all the marriages that have been destroyed because of sexual immorality. The reputations that have been ruined because of sexual immorality. There's not a year that goes by that there's not multiple public officials that resign in shame because they get caught involved in some kind of sexual relationship and they have to exit in shame. And we haven't even touched on sexually transmitted diseases, which, by the way, is another thing that's very conveniently ignored by the media. When's the last time you heard the media talking about sexually transmitted diseases? They don't talk about it, do they? You know why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative. The fact of the matter is that there's a crisis in sexually transmitted diseases in this country. It's a horrible, horrible problem. Increasingly, there are sexually transmitted diseases that we do not have drugs to treat. But we're not going to talk about those, but we should talk about those. And all this urging, get your kids inoculated against this and that. And a lot of that has to do with sexual acting out. If your kids never acted out sexually, they wouldn't need these shots. The only reason they need these shots is because these diseases are picked up sexually transmitted. So many today, it just aggravates me and frightens me and frustrates me. So many just refuse to acknowledge all the problems that are associated with irresponsible sexuality and sexual expression. And here we are. It's interesting. Last Wednesday night, if you were here, Steve did a great job introducing a study of Revelation, what he's going to talk about in Revelation. One of the points that he made, and it's an extremely important one, is that these books, the biblical Proverbs, were written to a certain audience, but is written for everyone. 2:4. 1 Corinthians is written to the Corinthian church,
but it's written for you and me as well. There are principles found in there that are very, very important. I hear this garbage, well, you know, man, this book's too old. I mean, it isn't relevant anymore. Really? Really? This book was written 3,000 years ago. 3,000 years ago. And it's just as relevant today as it was then. And the warnings that it contains are just as relevant today as they were then. Why? Because human beings are still human beings. And we face the same problems and the same challenges. We have the same strengths and the same weaknesses that people did 3,000 years ago. And so this may be a book written to the people of that time, but it's definitely written for us as well. Why does Solomon talk about this? Again, I really believe that our culture today is in a sense, a very unique situation. Now, some will say there's nothing new under the sun. I would agree with that, but there are some wrinkles that are new. Okay, there's some bottom line stuff that never changes, but there are some wrinkles, I think, that are new. One is, and we'll talk about this on Sunday night, we'll talk about this, separating gender and sex. On multiple levels, that's just stupid. Excuse me. I'm serious. Scientifically, logically, and otherwise, that is just stupid. You cannot separate gender and sex. They are the same thing. They are. Now, a doctor by the name of John Money came along with this idea, and it's one fraught with all kinds of disasters. But he put forth this idea, well, no, your gender is not necessarily your sex. You can have a different gender than the sex that you're born with. Now, this is one of those new wrinkles I've read and read and read, and I can't find that back anywhere. I mean, this is a new wrinkle that somehow you can separate and yet it has become inculcated in our culture, and I guarantee you it affects you every day. It's a big, big deal, man. In all kinds of ways. It affects our kids at school, it affects people in college, it affects the workplace, it affects things politically, you name it. And it has an effect. And it's a twisted distortion of sexuality. This idea, and here's what it goes back to, and again, we'll talk about it. It goes back to the idea that your gender is a social construct. That your gender is what you're taught to be. If you taught little boys to be girls, they would be girls. Now anybody, excuse me again, but anybody with any common sense who's raised kids know that's stupid. A little boy is a little boy and a little girl is a little girl. And this idea now of transsexuality, my 4-year-old has said that he wants to be a little girl and he's a little boy, but I want to honor that and I want him to be a little girl. He's 4. He's 4. Take a 4-year-old and give them multiple choices and see how they handle it. They don't. If you could choose anything for supper, what would you have? Their response would be what? Twizzlers and Jell-O and whipped cream. You know, I don't know, but they've got no idea, man. And you're saying at 4 or 5 they can choose their sexuality? Really? There was one guy who was writing, he was so proud of himself because his little 5-year-old, he wasn't going to force his little 5-year-old into a narrow niche. Okay, he was going to allow his little 5-year-old who had decided that he was a girl to be a girl. And he was going to give him a girl's name and all this. And he asked his 5-year-old, now I want you to think about this and I want you to see the hypocrisy and just the idiocy in this. He asked his little 5-year-old, what do you want your name to be? Grease. I want to be called Grease. Well, Daddy and Mama rapidly decided that probably wouldn't be a good name choice. And so they named him Grace, because they didn't want him calling himself Grease. That would be embarrassing. Now, I want you to think about it. Here's a 5-year-old who can choose his sexuality, but he can't choose his name. He can be given the responsibility to decide what gender he's going to be, but he's not old enough to assume the responsibility to pick his own name. That's what we're dealing with today. Do you understand why this is so relevant? Why his discussion of sexuality needs to be up front and needs to be emphasized? We got terrible problems with sexual harassment in the workplace. We do. Why? Well, let me put forth a couple of things. God forbid, man, this is just practical. You know, it can't be practical in this day and age, but this is just... Okay, we're raising a bunch of young guys, again, that are highly educated, technically sophisticated barbarians. They're not being taught morals. They're not being taught morality. They're not being taught how to conduct themselves around a female. That's not being modeled for them. What do you expect? Well, and then you have women who, and I'm not knocking it, but I mean, it's just a fact. Why do you put makeup on? To make yourself look more ugly? Less attractive? Huh? You'll be safer. I'll just make myself up and I'll be safer. No. I mean, honestly, why do you put your makeup on? To make yourself more attractive. Why do you wear high heels? Huh? They're not comfortable. They can't be. Why do you wear high heels? Well, it flexes your calves. That's sexually attractive. I mean, let's be honest, huh? Let's just be honest. So we have this horrible problem with sexual harassment. Well, yeah. And we're going to. Why? Because we're a bunch of pagans. We're a bunch of pagans. And pagans are not going to act in a responsible way because they're not being taught what God says about males and females and how males and females are to interact with each other and how they're to treat one another. I mean, it just breaks my heart, man. You send your daughter off to college and, you know, what do? You give her this big lecture about, well, honey, don't walk by yourself across the campus at night. Stay away from dark places and don't go here and don't go. Isn't that horrible? I mean, it's horrible that they have to live in fear. Why? Because we have been so culturally and socially irresponsible about teaching our young people about their sexuality. We've thrown all these doors wide open in the name of freedom, not appreciating and understanding that at the same time we're slamming all other kinds of doors shut on them, and we're trapping them and entrapping them in all kinds of terrible, terrible difficulties. I heard the other day on the news that if you want to come into this country as an immigrant, as a legal immigrant, under a protected status, go and tell the people at the border that you're trans. And if you're transsexual, you are a protected status, and you will be given priority to get into this country. I don't even know where to go with that. But that's where we're at. That is a reflection of the politicization and the thinking that has seized this culture that is a part of postmodernism, and that's what we'll be talking about this evening. We'll be talking about postmodernism, and boy, you need to understand it. I'm ashamed of myself. For years, I heard the term and just kind of blew it off, didn't think about it. I had no idea of the implications and ramifications of postmodern thought. I do now, unfortunately. We're in the middle of it. In fact, I would argue that today our culture is being managed and run by postmodernists. That's why we're in the mess we're in. Postmodernism's taken over. Postmodernism runs things. We're on the outside looking in now. We're not on the inside looking out anymore. It's one. And the ramifications for that are huge, but it's important that we understand what's going on. Wow, did I get off track on this? But I think it's so important that you appreciate and understand the wisdom of Solomon in saying, son, don't play around with sexuality. Can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes not be burned? Can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched? So is he who goes into his neighbor's wife. No one who touches her will go unpunished. People don't despise a thief if he steals to satisfy his appetite when he's hungry, but if he's caught, he'll pay sevenfold. He will give all the goods of his house. He who commits adultery lacks sense. He who does it destroys himself. He will get wounds and dishonor, and his disgrace will not be wiped away. For jealousy makes a man furious, and he will not spare when he takes revenge. He will accept no compensation. He will refuse though you multiply gifts. Pretty straightforward, huh? Here's what you get when you head down that path. That's from Proverbs 6, beginning of verse 27. Let's bow. Father, we so desperately need wisdom. Your wisdom, not earthly wisdom. Wisdom from above that James talks about. Father, we need that wisdom to guide our lives, to guide us as we raise our children, as we influence our grandchildren, as we interact with each other. You've promised again in the book of James that you'll give us wisdom if we ask for it, and Father, we beg for it. We beg you to give us wisdom. In the middle of this corrupt, confused world, help us to be wise people who can show other people the way they need to go. Father, please bless us in this week. Guide us, help us to be a light in darkness. Help us to be a people who contribute to the cures of what's going on in this country and not the issues and the sicknesses. Please guide us and bless us and help us, Father, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. You're dismissed. Thank you.